Huge news. Tom Thibodeau has been fired. My microphone's broken. The XLR cable's not working. Still had to do an episode. Had to get my take on this. Had to get my take on this. First of all, first and foremost, if you're a Knicks fan celebrating right now, don't celebrate. Thank Tom Thibodeau. Thank him. This man took this franchise from the depths of irrelevancy, from being a joke, to 2 games away from the NBA Finals. 4 out of 5 years making the NBA playoffs, developing young talent, whether or not they traded that young talent away to upgrade or they stayed on the team, a la Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson. He created a culture that did not exist in this organization for decades. For decades. Now, we are going to talk about where he went wrong. I understand he went wrong in different places. There is critiques of Tom Thibodeau that are 100% completely fair. But be fair to the guy. This man turned this franchise around. Him, along with Leon Rose, Julius Randle deserves credit, but Tom Thibodeau is a huge reason why the New York Knicks are where they are today, if not the main reason why. And if they ever win a championship, if this rendition of the New York Knicks goes on to win a championship, of course it won't be because of him, because he won't be the coach. But he laid the foundation. And I think he deserves a standing ovation every time he comes back to the Garden. He deserves to be loved by every Knicks fan. He is a savior in a lot of ways. Didn't bring a championship to the city, but he made this team what they are today. He made this team a contender, and he has given this fan base hope going forward. So before we even talk about Tom Thibodeau and what went wrong, thank you, Tom. Thank you for bringing basketball back to the Garden, for bringing life back to the Garden, for bringing life back into a city that was depraved of basketball energy. I grew up as a Knicks fan in the 90s. Starks, Ewing, Oakley, those guys, those were my guys. And ever since the 2000s, it's been a ghost town. And because of you and others as well, the Knicks have the pulse of the city again. And I think even though it might have ended in a way where we didn't want, you didn't want, your contributions to this franchise are greatly appreciated. Now, moving on, where did Tom go wrong? I think it's pretty obvious here, right? You had a combination of Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns was brought in, obviously, to stretch out the offense, to make the offense more dynamic, to give space to Jalen Brunson. The problem was that all he did was give space to Jalen Brunson when Jalen Brunson was on the floor. They started off great. This Knicks offense was at a historic rate, and then all of a sudden coaches figured out they could put the big on Josh Hart, small guy on Karl-Anthony Towns, and Tibbs never adjusted. Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson never got on the same page offensively together. You know, if they were scoring the basketball, it was because one of them was doing it on their own. They weren't really doing the pick and roll. They weren't really going off each other. There wasn't a lot of chemistry between Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think Leon Rose is going to look for another coach who can actually find that chemistry between the two. Now, some of that has to do with lineups as well. Like I said, Josh Hart starting in the whole year, getting the minutes that he got. He's my favorite player, so this is not a knock on Josh. But when defenses made that adjustment, putting the big guy on Josh, dropping back, daring him to shoot, clogging the paint, and also putting a small guy on Karl-Anthony Towns, it took away some of, what Karl-Anthony Towns could be. And Tibbs never really adjusted until the Pacers series when it was kind of too late, and even then, he still gave Josh Hart 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So I think that has something to do with it. The fact that he's a defensive coach and he couldn't have any answers for that end of the floor. Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson are 2 liabilities on that end. Let's just be honest. And I think you can argue that a lot of it was roster construction. How can you expect Tom Thibodeau to put forth a valiant defensive effort every night with his team if you have 2 weak links? He loved drop coverage, which he was very stubborn about. He did go to switching against Boston, but he did not switch it up enough for my liking, and I assume for Leon's liking as well. He did not use the bench in a way that a lot of Knicks fans wanted him to use the bench. The lineups, we were begging him to use different lineups, to stop using the starting lineup when all the data is showing him that, hey, listen, this lineup does not work. He still went at it until it was too late. Game 1, I think, might have got him fired alone just the way that was coached. My personal beef with that was you're up 14 with however minutes left to go, and Mitchell Robinson's on the bench, and you have Karl-Anthony Towns out there not switching, not doing what he's supposed to do, and a lot of it is on Cat too. It's not on Tibbs, but you're going to let go of a coach before you let go of a player, and that's just the reality of the NBA. There are a lot of different things that went wrong with Tibbs this year. Even though they won 51 games, they didn't beat a single team in the regular season that was worth anything. They didn't beat the Celtics. They didn't beat the Thunder. They didn't beat the Cavs. They didn't beat the Warriors. They didn't beat the Lakers. They didn't beat the Clippers. Not a single game against any of those teams in the regular season. Now, they did beat the Celtics in the playoffs, and that matters the most. But you still have to wonder, was this run for real? Are we fooling ourselves here? Is this fool's gold? We did lose to the Pacers in 6. So who knows? Not that the Pacers aren't good, but just saying. Had trouble with the Detroit Pistons 6 games. Barely scraped out a game 6. So I think there were a lot of questions. And I think in the NBA, you fire a coach before you let go of a player. And I think Leon Rose is going to look for a coach who he feels confident could make Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns work, and maybe this rendition of the New York Knicks. You give up 5 picks for Mikal Bridges, who didn't seem happy with Tom Thibodeau either. His comments before the Portland game seemed to be directed at Tibbs. Deuce McBride with post-game comments after Game 6 seemed to be directed at Tibbs. Tibbs seemed to lose the locker room. I think he had Jalen. I think he had Josh. Outside of that, I'm not sure he had many people on his side in that locker room. And when that happens, it's a ticking time bomb. It's going to be interesting to see how Jalen and Josh respond to that, right? With a new coach. I'm sure as long as Rick's around, Jalen will be fine. But we'll see. I feel for Tibbs, man. I feel for him, man. He brought this franchise back to relevancy. And it's going to be hard for him to watch the Knicks next year because they're going to be good. They're one of the best teams in the league. They're contenders for the next few years, for the foreseeable future. If everybody's healthy, knock on wood. So, who's next? I don't know. Johnny Bryant is a name that's coming up. He's a former Knicks assistant coach who was with the Cavaliers this year. He was named by Shams a finalist for the Phoenix Suns job. And I think maybe that's the reason why Leon pulled the trigger so quickly, because maybe he wanted to interview Johnny Bryant. Maybe Johnny Bryant's at the top of his list. A lot of Knicks fans are speculating Mike Malone. I don't think Mike Malone's going to be the coach of the New York Knicks. I think it's a lateral move. If you're firing your coach, you better be picking up a coach who you think is going to do a better job, not going to do the same job. Mike Malone had a lot of the same issues as Tom Thibodeau. He also lost the locker room in Denver, and you saw a spirited Denver Nuggets team in the playoffs this year, even though they lost to OKC in 7. It looks like they might be losing to the defending champions in 7 games. That is nothing to sniff at. Adelman got an extension based off of how he gained that trusted locker room. So I don't think Mike Malone's the answer. I don't want one of those, former basketball players like Chauncey Billups, who has no coaching experience, to come in and run the team. I want somebody who has paid their dues, who has shown that he can do the job, who's young enough to have a relationship with these players too, but old enough to be respected. That sounds like Johnny Bryant. I don't know him schematically. I think that's why I'm not jumping out the window with him. I don't know what his philosophy is. I know his coach. I know where he comes from. I mean, he's Tibbs and now Kenny Atkinson. Everybody speaks fondly of him, but I don't know him schematically. I don't know what he brings to the table. And I think that's the problem here, right? There's a lot of young coaches who are up and coming, but at the end of the day, do we know what they're like schematically? No. So as a Knicks fan, I'm sitting back, and whoever Leon Rose decides to hire, as long as it's not somebody who I know in the past or I had beef with in the past, I'm just going to root for them. Going to cheer them on. That's all we can do as Knicks fans. But it's a sad day. I genuinely think it's a sad day. I don't think anybody should be celebrating. Now, if you thought Tibbs was not the coach going forward, sure, there's a part of you that's like, all right, let's get going next year. This is great. But to be celebrating this man getting fired, that's weird to me. I think it's weird because I had my beefs with Tibbs. I had my problems with Tibbs too. I don't think I would have went as far as saying that I wanted him fired, but I would acknowledge he was on the hot seat for sure. But to sit here and celebrate him being fired, I'm not doing that. And you shouldn't do that either as a Knicks fan. You should thank you. Even if you thought he should be gone, thank you. Appreciate it. So that's where we're at right now. Listen, subscribe to the channel. It's going to be a crazy offseason. We're going to be bringing you rumors, headlines, trades, free agency, all that good stuff in the offseason on Knicks Latest. Apologize for the audio today. Like I said, I don't know what's going on with my XLR cable. I think the cable broke. I got to get a new one for you guys. And hopefully we'll have the audio fixed by tomorrow. But still had to do an episode for you. Still had to give my take on Tom Thibodeau being fired by the New York Knicks. A weird day. It's a weird day, but it's a new era here in New York Knicks basketball, man. It's a new era. I'm excited. Again, I am Josh Rodriguez at Josh_Rodriguez_. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you drop a comment. I want to read your comments on air for the next show. Definitely pull a couple comments. Till then, see you tomorrow for another episode of Knicks Latest. Peace.